In the 19th century, the Vanderbilts rose from a single steamboat to become the richest family in America during the Gilded Age. At the heart of this glittering empire stood a hidden matriarch. She saw the dynasty at its peak and lived long enough to watch its wealth and power slowly crumble before her eyes. This is her story. The woman who would become known as Alice Claypoole Vanderbilt was born as Alice Claypoole Gwynn on the 11th of November 1845 in Cincinnati, Ohio. At the time, Cincinnati was a modest town that was starting to boom into a leading city of the expanding Midwest. Her father was Abraham Evan Gwynn, a lawyer, and her mother Rachel was the daughter of Henry Collins Flagg Jr., who was a leading politician and newspaper editor. Henry even served as mayor of New Haven, Connecticut from 1834 to 1839. Alice also had prominent ancestors who fought in the Revolutionary War, so she descended from a distinguished American family. Sadly, Alice's father died in 1855 when she was just 9 years old. Her mother then started a new relationship with Albert Matthews, a writer and journalist who wrote under the pen name Paul Siegfolk. They married in 1861, and he became Alice's stepfather. Still, they made sure she received a thorough private education, focusing on literature, religion, the arts, and the social graces expected of young women in elite society. Not long after the marriage, the family relocated to New York City, and this one event would have a huge impact on the course of Alice's entire life. In New York, Alice entered society in the mid-1860s, a time when the city's social elite was rapidly taking shape during the Gilded Age. She became active at St. Bartholomew's Episcopal Church, an influential congregation on Park Avenue in Midtown Manhattan. While teaching Sunday school there, she met Cornelius Vanderbilt II, heir to one of America's richest and most powerful business dynasties. Just 2 years her senior, Cornelius was already marked for prominence. Their courtship was swift, and on February 4, 1867, Alice, just 21 years old, married into the Vanderbilt family, forever tying her life to one of the greatest names in American history. Alice and Cornelius soon began having children. There would be 7 in all. Sadly, their oldest child, a girl named Alice after her mother, who was born in 1869, died in 1874. Their second child, William Henry, named after Cornelius's father, just about lived into his adult years, but he died in the middle of one of the last fatal outbreaks of typhoid in the United States in 1892, while studying at Yale University in his early 20s. The other 5 children lived to be much older, though Alice outlived all but 3 of her offspring. The third eldest, Cornelius Vanderbilt III, was born in 1873. His relationship with his parents became extremely problematic after he married Grace Graham Wilson, the daughter of a New York banker. Cornelius III was disinherited as a result, and never reconciled with his father. Gertrude, the fourth of their 7 children, became an artist and founded the Whitney Museum in the meatpacking district of Manhattan. Alfred and Reginald, the 2 younger sons, born in 1877 and 1880, would become the main beneficiaries of their father's fortune, and were extremely wealthy men. Alice's final child, Gladys, was born in 1886, when Alice was into her early 40s, and would go on to marry a Hungarian count in 1908. To grasp how Alice's life was transformed by her marriage, we must first understand the staggering fortune she stepped into. Saying she married into money hardly captures it. She was joining the most powerful dynasty in America. When Alice wed Cornelius in 1867, his grandfather, Cornelius Vanderbilt, was still alive, presiding over a fortune so vast it dwarfed nearly every other in the nation. He had started out back in the 1810s working on the boats that ferried people from Manhattan to Queens, Brooklyn and New Jersey, in an age before the island was linked to these places via large bridges. When the steamships were first developed, Vanderbilt had been an early adopter of the technology, and he soon developed a fleet of steamships which expanded to control a vast part of the shipping along the East Coast. He became known as the Commodore as a result, a word which means the head of a fleet. The Commodore first built his fortune in shipping, but by the mid-19th century, he was pouring that wealth into America's booming railroads. Around Alice's birth in 1845, railway mania was sweeping the nation, and Vanderbilt played a pivotal role in developing railway lines on the East Coast and linking New York to rising Midwestern cities like Chicago and Cleveland. When the Commodore died in 1877, he left behind over $100 million, an almost unimaginable sum at the time, equivalent to over $3 billion today. Despite having over a dozen children, the Commodore left 95% of his estate to Alice's father-in-law, William Henry Vanderbilt. William Henry barely had to lift a finger if he wanted, but he worked hard, and his father's monopoly on America's railroads guaranteed his fortune would only increase. By the time he died in 1885, less than 9 years after his father, his $100 million inheritance had doubled to $200 million. He left most of it to his two eldest surviving sons, Cornelius Vanderbilt II and William Kissam Vanderbilt. So, 18 years after their marriage, Alice and Cornelius, already very wealthy, now stepped into almost unimaginable riches, billionaire status in today's terms, catapulting Alice into a life of even more luxury and cementing her role as matriarch of the most dazzling dynasty in America. For all their wealth though, family life for Alice, Cornelius and their children was not without its problems. At the same time, it was comfortable, to put it mildly. In 1883, he and Alice had begun overseeing the construction of the Cornelius Vanderbilt II house at the intersection of 5th Avenue and West 57th Street in Manhattan. The mansion was the largest private residence in New York City and served as a powerful symbol of the Vanderbilt family's immense wealth and influence. To get a sense of how big it was, consider that there was a salon, music room and conservatory on the first floor, while the dining room on the ground floor was big enough that it doubled as an art gallery. Alice and Cornelius were firmly planted in New York high society, though Alice herself was far less obsessed with social recognition than her ambitious sister-in-law, Alva Vanderbilt, who waged a delicate war with Mrs. Astor to secure her place among the city's old money elite. Still, in March 1883, at one of Alva's legendary masquerade balls, Alice stunned the crowd with a gown that would become immortalized in history as the electric light dress. White satin, wired to carry electric current, and studded with glass beads arranged like lightning bolts, the dress literally glowed, a dazzling nod to the brand new electrical lighting recently installed in New York City. Alice's bold choice became the sensation of the night and dominated press coverage, cementing her reputation as a quietly audacious figure. The event itself set a new standard for New York society, elevating parties to unprecedented heights of extravagance and spectacle, and signaling the Vanderbilt's dominance in the glittering competitive world of the Gilded Age elite. To further their prestige, and because they could, in 1893, the couple began work on a grand summer residence, the Breakers. This was at Newport in Rhode Island, and was a vast 70-room manor house that was 5 stories tall and was surrounded by a huge estate. While the house in Manhattan was torn down in the mid-1920s to make way for the city's growing number of skyscrapers, the Breakers is on the National Register of Historic Places to this day. Despite her immense wealth, Alice would often occupy her grand homes alone, especially after her husband's health declined. Cornelius suffered a debilitating stroke in 1896 and died 3 years later, aged 55, leaving Alice a widow with a staggering fortune. Cornelius's opulence and generous philanthropy meant that he hadn't increased the fortune he inherited like his father before him. At his death, his estate was appraised at nearly $73 million. Alice received a $7 million trust and an income of $5,000 per week, while the remainder of the fortune was divided among his children. After his passing, Alice largely withdrew from New York society, turning her attention to her family. Yet, from the sidelines, She witnessed with growing despair as her husband's fortune was squandered by her children and grandchildren. They, as well as extended family members, indulged in extravagant lifestyles and opulent mansions, oblivious to the erosion of wealth. Having observed the spectacular rise of the Vanderbilt dynasty, Alice could do little to prevent the slow, inevitable fall of the House of Vanderbilt. As matriarch of the Vanderbilt dynasty, Alice was a devoted supporter of numerous charitable causes. A committed Christian, she backed the Manhattan YMCA and became an early American supporter of the Red Cross, contributing to relief efforts such as the response to the 1889 Johnstown flood in Pennsylvania. Alice's philanthropy also extended to education and culture. In the 1890s, after the death of their son William in 1892, she and Cornelius funded Vanderbilt Hall at Yale in his memory. She supported Newport Hospital until her death and made one of her most lasting gifts to New York City, an elaborate set of gates for Central Park, still standing today at the Conservatory Garden entrance near 105th Street. Alice was known for being a bit of a firebrand in her views as well, especially when it came to religion. One story made the newspapers in the early 1920s when Alice was well into her 70s. It involved Dr. Leighton Parks, a controversial minister who had been made the rector of the St. Bartholomew's Church in New York in 1904. There he acquired a reputation for his independent views on theological issues. For instance, Parks held the view that the idea that the Virgin Mary was in fact a virgin at the time of conception of Jesus was not true. Alice was a member of St. Bartholomew's congregation for many years. That is until the day that Dr. Parks preached a sermon there, in which he outlined what can only be called a conspiracy theory that claimed that the Roman Catholic Church was aiming to take over the United Kingdom. This harked back to concerns in Britain in the 17th and 18th centuries that the papacy was trying to re-Catholicize England, but it had absolutely no bearing in reality in the early 20th century. Instead, Parks' sermon reflected modern concerns in New York about the huge influx of Roman Catholics from countries like Ireland and Italy into the city since the 1880s. Alice made it clear that she would not accept listening to such views, and she left the congregation at St. Bartholomew's, proving that even in her twilight years, she was still a formidable woman. Alice's husband may not have lived into old age, but she lived a very full life as matriarch of a sprawling family. For instance, she went on to have well over a dozen grandchildren and played an active role in their lives. This was especially true of Alfred's younger children from his second marriage to Margaret Mary Emerson. They were born in 1912 and 1914 and were infants when Alfred perished in the sinking of the Lusitania in May 1915, meaning that their grandmother played an important part in ensuring they had a good upbringing. Alice's life was difficult in other ways. Her youngest son, Reginald, developed a serious drinking problem and died in 1925 from cirrhosis of the liver at just 45 years of age. However, his passing prompted both Alice and one of her children to reconsider old family rifts. In 1926, 30 years after Cornelius Vanderbilt III had married Grace against his parents' wishes, and during which time they had not spoken, he and his mother finally reconciled. The union was especially moving, as he was one of only 3 of her surviving children by that time. When he died in 1925, Reginald left behind a daughter named Gloria, who was born in 1924. She later became a fashion designer and model, and was the mother of the CNN presenter Anderson Cooper. Gloria's inheritance from her father as an infant became the source of a scandalous trial in the 1930s between her mother and aunt, one which filled Alice with contempt in her final years, believing it was airing the family's private affairs too much in public. Interestingly, these family ties mean that Anderson Cooper is the great-grandson of Alice, despite the fact that she was born all the way back in 1845. Despite the many tragedies of her family life, Alice continued to play a major role as matriarch of the Vanderbilt family down to her death. By the 1920s and 1930s, however, the family fortune had been widely dispersed. The Commodore's vast wealth, once seemingly limitless, had been squandered and divided among hundreds of descendants over generations, diluting the empire he had once built. In 1923, Alice moved into a townhouse at 857 Fifth Avenue on Manhattan's Upper East Side, making way for the demolition of the grand Cornelius Vanderbilt II house, the mansion she had built alongside her husband at the height of the Vanderbilt wealth. She remained there for the rest of her life, passing away on April 24, 1934, aged 88. Remarkably, Alice left behind over $10 million, a testament to her disciplined life as a widow, since she had never lived beyond her allowance and carefully preserved her wealth. In doing so, she became one of the few Vanderbilts of later generations to die having spent less than she earned. The esteemed matriarch was laid to rest in the Vanderbilt family mausoleum on Staten Island, closing the final chapter on a life that had witnessed both the dazzling heights and the slow decline of America's most famous dynasty. Thank you so much everyone for watching this video on Alice Vanderbilt. I hope you found it interesting. Let me know what you thought of her life down below in the comments, and if you have any suggestions, also let me know in the comments. If you want more stories on Vanderbilts, also let me know, or more American rich heiresses, also let me know in the comments. Anyway, that's all from me, so I'll see all of you in the next Forgotten Life. Thanks.